Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome again to everyone who's joined today's webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Really excited that you guys are all here. Today we'll be talking about preparing for a cookieless future. Before diving into that, I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Jackie Lee, and I'll be your host today. I'm the head of publishers at Similarweb, and in my role, I work closely with our clients in this space on strategies to meet their engagement, ad sales, and subscription goals using our tool. I was most recently the director of audience and data strategy at the New York Times. And one of my primary responsibilities there was to actually develop a cohesive strategy to pivot the business to respond to this upcoming cookieless future, cookieless cliff, cookie apocalypse, however you want to name that. So before we dive right in, I'd like to take a quick minute to lay out the game plan for today. I'm going to spend a few minutes just grounding us in the macro factors, the context, and the history behind why we're spending some time together today. I'm then going to get us aligned on which IDs we're focusing on. Not all cookies are created equal, so I think it'll be helpful to make sure we're grounded and aligned on which cookies are actually crumbling. And finally, I'm going to take us through some very specific examples of how the Similarweb tool can help you prepare and pivot your business. Just as a quick reminder, our tool is actually cookieless. And so pre or post whatever day Google decides to deprecate third-party cookies, the data that you'll be getting from Similarweb is still going to be consistent. Okay, so part one, what is happening? I'm going to actually start by just putting this out there, that the free and open internet as we know it is not free at all. Publishers fund the creation of this free content in two pretty important ways. The first way is selling advertising. Today, it's mostly digital advertising. And we're selling this to brands looking to reach their target customers who are consuming the content that publishers are creating. As we all know, our industry used to be primarily funded by high margin print ads, a la Mad Men. And the original hope was that digital advertising would slot right in and be a one-for-one replacement for print dollars. As we all know, that's not quite how things panned out. And that brings us to the second primary way that publishers today are really funding content creation. It's by finding and habituating readers or viewers, building brand affinity, and asking these loyal readers or viewers to purchase a subscription or in some cases a product. It's literally asking them to pay for the content that they love. The New York Times, which is the brand that I most recently came from, is an example of a publisher brand that's really built out this revenue model that is really subscription first. Both of these revenue models are enabled by an entire technology ecosystem today, either buying or selling ads. And so what happens when the IDs and technologies enabling this ecosystem start to disappear? Why are they disappearing? We've got a good thing going here. So let's do a quick deep dive into why this is happening. There's three things. The first is privacy and regulation. Government regulation intended to preserve consumer privacy is showing no signs of slowing down. GDPR, CCPA, those terms are part of our zeitgeist now. And as we see the data breaches and the hacks that are happening, people are hearing more and more about their data and the protection and the usage of it, and what happens when it's not protected or not used properly. In addition to what's happening in the US with state regulations like CCPA, there are indicators that there's now appetite for a national statute. Second thing, which we're all well aware of, is industry-imposed changes. Major vendors like Google and Apple are making changes to their browsers and operating systems that have a substantial impact on the day-to-day operations for folks like you and I. Google recently made an announcement about deprecating their mobile ad ID for Android phones. And ironically, it seems like this might actually happen before they sunset cookies in Chrome. Separately, industry vendors have proposals out in the market, terms like UID 2.0 or FLoC, which are, I think, the industry's attempt to respond to and address the loss of cookies. But these are all still in pretty early stages. And to be honest, I'm not quite sure how well these are going to do in market, between the lack of visibility into scale, the lack of visibility into adoption, and the spirit of these. In a way, it's sort of against the spirit of following people around the internet, which is why we're heading towards this cookieless future. These are all things that all of us are having to respond to. And the third macro trend that's really impacting publishers here is around monetization models. I touched on this a little in the previous slide, but the sunsetting of third-party cookie support by Google next year really has enormous implications on how publishers can literally go about monetizing content. If brands advertising on publishers can't attribute spend for a conversion through programmatic ad buying, then let's play that out. There might be a flight to big name brands with lots of traffic. We're already seeing a shift to spend to the walled gardens, to Facebook, to Google, where they have so much data on their users. And we know that users are spending so much time in those environments. There are implications on being able to monetize content through ad spend in that way. Publishers are, of course, always looking to find new ways to sell compelling, native, bespoke ad experiences. Podcast ads are coming to mind, but we're also seeing a shift of focus to growing subscription products, growing affiliate revenue streams, and in some cases, actually selling real merchandise. So we covered a lot in the previous slide, and this slide actually lays out that timeline of at least the major regulatory and industry changes that's brought us here together today. So starting pre-2018, Apple Safari, Mozilla Firefox already sunset third-party cookies in their browsers. Even when they made those changes, life continued on for most of our industry because realistically, Chrome accounts for 2/3 of web traffic. And so we felt it, but we didn't really feel it the same way we're about to feel it. May 2018, GDPR goes into effect in Europe. And this is really, I think, impactful because companies that violate these GDPR protections are subject to, they're going to be subject to heavy fines. In January of 2020, Google announced the phase out of third-party support, which set off this sort of, it will set off the beginnings of why we're talking today. And it's signaling really the end of third-party cookies. As we all know, COVID lockdowns happened very shortly after. So the industry response that Google anticipated after their announcement didn't exactly play out the way that they were expecting. June 2020, Apple announced new opt-in requirements for ad tracking with IDFA, their mobile ad ID. They did delay enforcement to 2021 for the industry to evaluate the impact on apps. But given that time, the industry is starting to see, or at the time started to see, the halo effects on mobile web. July 2020, CCPA took effect in California, which established a right to data privacy. It's a major piece of regulation in the US governing consumer data protections, and it provides recourse to individuals. It was the first major state regulation that now we're seeing other states start to adopt similar protections. And as I mentioned, we're likely headed towards a national regulation. April of this year, Apple finally enforced those opt-in requirements in apps who use IDFA. For me, I'm starting to see these pop-ups on my phone. I'm sure you're noticing it as well. And as we all know, Google will be sunsetting third-party cookies sometime early next year. I think last week they announced that there might be a possible bonus of them setting their AD/ID before this year is out as well. So there's a lot happening here. So given that, this is the macro environment that we're all operating in. So let's drill down a little bit into, okay, we're talking about cookies, we're talking about this macro environment. Let's make sure we're talking about the same cookies. Like, what exactly do we mean when we say third-party cookies going away? So I want to start really quickly by clarifying the difference between web and app IDs. I know I've touched on IDFA, AD/ID, but really, let's start by cookies. Cookies are a snippet of code that is really tied to a user's browser, and it's placed when a user visits a website through a desktop or mobile web browser. These already can be blocked or cleared by a user. And again, for the purposes of today, we're really focusing on this type of ID. This differs from mobile device IDs. These IDs are linked to a mobile phone and are used for app advertising purposes, while mobile device IDs or mobile ad IDs are not directly tied to the browser and cookie changes we're preparing for. We're already seeing that Apple's changes to IDFA are already causing a halo effect on mobile web activity. We're even seeing this within some of these social networks and walled gardens. So drilling down into cookies here, not all cookies are actually going to be affected by Google's changes. So first-party cookies are actually set by the website a user is visiting. Sites and publishers are using these to collect data on the browsing behavior of that user, to remember settings and login. Like, how annoying would it be to have to keep logging into the same site over and over again, and perform other functions that allow the site to actually run. Data collected by a first-party cookie actually stays with the owner of that site. Third-party cookies are actually set by an entity that is separate from the domain or a website that a user is visiting. So like if a user is going to people.com, Google's cookie on people.com would be considered third-party. These are primarily used for advertising purposes, and they actually collect data to be moved outside of that domain or website that user is visiting. This is the type of cookie that Apple and Mozilla have already effectively banished, and it's the thing that we're really here to talk about today. These are the things that are really primarily impacted by Google's announcement. So how pervasive are these cookies today? This is just a quick snapshot of like buckets of how brands and publishers are using this today. We're using these to retarget people that have left our sites, to find them somewhere else. We are using these cookies to find that millennium that likes sugary cereal. So we can go ahead and advertise more cereal in the places that particular millennial is browsing. We use these cookies to tell our vendors information on how to make their bidding function better. It's almost like a set it and forget it. So, we don't have to worry about the efficiency of ad spend. We are using these to know who recently converted after seeing an ad 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, 28 days ago, and how to find more people like those people that recently converted. And we use these to understand more about a brand's target audiences and their behaviors. Who are they when they're not browsing a particular brand or a particular browser or particular publisher site? Like I said, cookies underpin a lot. And these are the things that are going to be impacted or maybe going away in the next year. So this is all happening and changing. How does Similarweb fit in here, and how can we help? So I'm going to start by voicing some of the questions that I've heard from clients, or questions that I had myself, that would be helpful to have answers to, that would be probably important to know before we start building a strategy on what to do to respond to this. After I sort of go through this, I'm going to, in the following slides, pull out a couple of key questions for an ad sales example and a consumer revenue example to literally show you how Similarweb can go about answering this. By the way, these are just going to be some of the paths forward. Similarweb has a ton of data, and so it's not the only path to answer one of these questions with our tool. There's many different approaches that one can take. So before I dive in, I'm just going to read these questions to give you a sense of the examples that we have here. What content do I produce that resonates most with my readers? Which sites are sending me the most traffic today? How can I better understand the behavior of my target audience in this context without cookies? What are innovative ways for me to measure the effectiveness of an ad buy? Where else are my advertisers buying ads? And which other sites do my readers visit often? So let's start with an ad sales use case and questions that an ad salesperson might be asking. We're going to actually start with a little role playing. I am going to pretend that I am an ad salesperson for GQ, and my industry focus is fashion apparel. Since it's GQ and it's men who are reading this, I'm specifically focused on men's clothing, and brands that would be looking to sell men's clothes. I know that my brand is getting a lot of ad sales through programmatic sources. So high volume, low margin, but I suspect that this might be at risk when cookies go away. My goal is to start to build a more direct relationship with some of the retail brands that are spending ad dollars, either with me or with my competitors. So when cookie apocalypse happens, my book of business is ahead of the game. So my first question is, how do I choose which brands I should be prioritizing to pitch to for an ad buy? And once I figure that out, how in the world do I put together a compelling pitch without using cookies? So bear with me on this. I actually pre-recorded the navigation that I'm going to take you through. This is so I can focus on taking you through the details on how Similarweb can help instead of getting distracted by actually having to click on things. I'm going to go ahead and hit play. Cool. So we're actually going to start in the research section of our platform, but it's really easy to toggle to the marketing solution as well. We'll be using both here. Research is really about the broader industry and the positioning of a brand or a publisher within it, while marketing is specific to a company's marketing mix. This is important to remember for this and for the upcoming examples. The first thing we're going to do is actually dive into website analysis. Realistically within this, we're going to focus on GQ.com. Remember, my profile that I'm playing here is that I'm focused on fashion industry and ad sales, and I'm focusing on the United States geo. This landing page that we take you to gives a quick snapshot and baseline of GQ's page views, visits, rankings, other metrics that just give you a quick snapshot of where we stand. So I'm going to jump right into competitive landscape, and this is to find GQ's competitors to start with. And of these, I like Esquire and Men's Journal because they have similar-ish target audiences. This is going to send me back to website analysis, and I'm actually going to scroll down to ad monetization. This is going to tell me who is spending money with me versus my competitors today in buying ads. And this looks pretty good, which is lots of dark blue. It's GQ. You can see here that is, we color code, so it helps you quickly visually see cues. But Nordstrom's looking a little teal here, maybe a little aquamarine. It's the only one of these top 5 spending brands amongst these 3 competitors that's not spending the majority of their ad money with GQ. So I am actually now, knowing this, going to focus on Gap and Macy's as Nordstrom's competitors, since of the set, these are the only other 2 brick and mortar stores here. I think we've answered our first question though, in that Nordstrom is probably a good brand to go after. They're in the top 5, but they're spending the majority of their spend with Esquire. So now that I know who we're pitching to, how do I convince them to shift their spend? So I know I'm going after Nordstrom. I'm going to open up Nordstrom.com and website analysis. And specifically within that, I'm going to look at segments. And I'm going to do a deep dive into the segment analysis of men's clothes. I've pre-created a Nordstrom segment here, and the way that our segments work is by URL. So I've specifically crawled through the URLs that contain men's clothing across Nordstrom, Macy's, and Gap's websites. You can see the trend line over time. Spend was highest or spiked during the holidays, November and December, and it's come down over time. You can toggle to metrics other than visits. There's page views, there's bounce rates, there's segment share. With this, you can clearly see that Nordstrom has the lowest traffic compared to Macy's and Gap. Macy's is gigantic as an advertiser, but even Gap dwarfs Nordstrom. So where's this traffic coming from? We can navigate to see the display ads that are referring to traffic to these sites. And what you can see here is that Nordstrom has half of the traffic as even Gap does from where they've actually deployed their ad spend. So we're going to keep this data point as a pitch, as part of the pitch. We're going to navigate back to research in a minute. But realistically, it's like if you're looking at where Macy's and Gap are seeing these results from their spend with GQ and Nordstrom is not seeing that from Esquire, I think that's a really impactful thing to keep in mind. So now that we're back in research, I'm going to be looking at the overlap between GQ and Esquire as publishers. This tells us that there is substantial, or that there's about 1.3 million visitors that go to GQ but are not visiting Esquire. We can use this within the pitch deck to position GQ as a way for Nordstrom to reach the same users as Macy's and Gap. And as we saw in that previous screen, they seem to be more successful at getting site visits from display ads than Nordstrom is with who they're choosing. Now we're going to pivot to look at Nordstrom's overlap with Macy's and Gap, exactly the same audience overlap screen, but instead of publishers, we're looking at the target for GQ's ad sales pitch. The closest competitor to site visits in size is Gap. You can run your cursor over these circles to see the overlap percentages. And what we're going to see is that Nordstrom and Gap have about a quarter of site visits that overlap. This is an important competitor audience overlap data point. If a quarter of Nordstrom's customers are also shopping at Gap and Gap is getting way more traffic from GQ than Nordstrom is in their advertising mix, that's something you can use when you're pitching. The final overlap we're going to look at is between Nordstrom and Esquire and Nordstrom and GQ. While we're going to see that the overlap is a little under 4% for both publisher brands, it's similar enough across both publishers. But what we can say to Nordstrom is that, hey, look, your competitors are advertising with GQ and they're seeing so much better performance. When you're pitching Nordstrom for ad dollars, it's almost like leaning into the FOMO for Nordstrom. Why not get in on some of that fun that Macy's and Gap are having with GQ? Why don't you allocate some of that budget over to us and we can prove out that we can still perform for you? One thing I want to call out here is that we did this all completely without cookies. So if you're practicing now, imagine in 8 months when cookies are no longer an option for brands like Nordstrom, like Macy's and Gap, imagine how much more powerful this will be. So the next example that I'm going to go to is actually, oopsies. I am going to the next example that we have here, which is pivoting to that second primary source of content monetization for publishers. So as we established earlier on, publishers are not just monetizing content through ad sales anymore. So let's look at a brand with a subscription product and goals. Now we're pivoting to be the Washington Post, and we're gonna pretend that we're a media strategist. Within this, I'm focused on paid media display and search, and I'm using these channels to get more of WAPO's readers to subscribe. So question 1, I know that retargeting is going away as cookies go away, and I know that context and site lists are sticking around. While cookies are here to tell me how I'm performing with conversions, I want to know who's sending me traffic today so I can start building a whitelist to test. Question 2, once I launch my display test, I'm going to refocus on my search strategy. I know that people who are searching for news or for my brand have already demonstrated intent. And I know that search is context first, not behaviorally driven cookie first. I know that post-cookie, search is still going to be really important to me, and it may become even more important then. So while I have cookies to tell me how I'm doing with conversions, how can I start to optimize my keywords? Am I missing anything? Is there anything I can learn from organic search that I can apply to paid? Okay, so we're going to dive right into question 1, which is whitelisting for display. We're going to start in marketing intelligence here. And I'm going to dive right into website performance. And in the interest of time, I'm going to compare WAPO to New York Times and CNN because I know who those competitors are. As you can see, I'm going to start scrolling down, and I'm specifically looking for referrals. And this is going to tell me the sites from which people are clicking to or clicking from to get to me, the Washington Post. Quick snapshot of how Washington Post is doing relative to these other brands. But really what I'm trying to get to is who's sending me traffic. As I get down to this screen, once I reach this, I'm going to click into the incoming traffic insights to see more referrals. As you can see, you can filter sites by content category, which you're going to see as I scroll down. And this is going to be important because you're not necessarily going to have just one gigantic whitelist. There's probably going to be multiple line items, and this will help you parse out different categories to test to see what is performing best. And there's going to be different optimizations that you're going to want to make. As you scroll down into this, you can look at referral opportunities. And these are sites that your competitors are getting traffic from, but you're not getting traffic from these sites. Funnily enough, we, WAPO, are actually sending a ton of traffic to New York Times. But other than that, here's a list of other opportunities to maybe run some paid media to do some competitive conquesting against your competitors. As we scroll down here, lots of news and media brands. And you can see the percentage of traffic, and you can see the volume of traffic from these various sites. Some of these are local brands, some of these are broader national brands, but all of which, this is where they're sending traffic to your competitors, but not you. What you can also look at is referral wins. So this is who's sending traffic to you today already. If you know that some of this is coming through organic traffic, this might be actually a good way to build a blacklist to actually make your paid spend more efficient. Now, since we know that you're looking to grow subscriptions, Similarweb has an option to look at engagement opportunities. So what we're looking at here is not just sites that are referring to competitors at volume. It's sites that are referring to competitors who then have audiences that have deeper engagement within your competitor's website. You can look through this and again, parse out anything that's not relevant, and eventually create, again, a distinct website based on distinct whitelist based on engagement. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is sites that are sending traffic that are new, that are sending traffic to you and to your competitors. What you can do with this is to understand changes in your competitors' ad strategy. Who is new to their ad buying mix? You can also see, as we click through this, trending sites, and this will tell you how much volume has increased for you and your competitors over time. This is important as you're going to be building out whitelist. There are different things that you can test. And again, this is all completely without cookies. As you pull this up, the last thing that I'm going to show you is how easy it is to actually download any one of these into an Excel. As I download that Excel list, you're going to be able to literally copy and paste websites and put that directly into your DSP. This will show up in 1 second. There we go, download Excel. As you're doing this, there's also going to be filters. So you can sort by volume, you can sort by competitor, you can sort by share over time, you can filter. There's many things that you can do here to be specific in what you're looking for. We've tried to make this as easy as possible for you so that as you're making this pivot, we're enabling you and empowering you with these tools. So now that we've answered this question, I'm going to go ahead and pivot now to the next slide, which is going to be missing search terms. So we've already figured out whitelist, we figured out display. I'm going to dive right into marketing intelligence here. So look, within marketing intelligence, we try to make this as easy as possible. And we've actually got a section for keyword research. As I mentioned before, marketing is about specific marketing channels versus research, which is more about industry benchmarking. Within keyword research, I'm going to dive right into keyword gap. With a click, you can figure out exactly what you're missing. So we know Washington Post. We're going to go ahead and add the same competitors as the last example. And immediately, Similarweb is showing you the overlap between WAPO and competitors within search keywords. As you scroll down, you can see a couple of things. You can see keyword wins. And this is where you're really killing it with non-branded keywords. But ultimately, what you really want to learn is ultimately the opportunities of what you're missing. Within keywords, you also can see the split between organic traffic and paid traffic from organic and paid search for each word. In a second, we're going to go into opportunities under recommendations. And this is really showing where your competitors' content is going to be getting search traffic, but you're not. Here we go, recommendations for opportunities. Literally, we tell you it's where your competitors are getting traffic, but you are not getting that traffic. So we can probably ignore the NYT cooking term here, but what we can use this for are other non-branded keywords to help with SEO or SEM optimization. As we look at search insights, we can also use this for clues on potentially new content to develop, because this is telling you what people are searching for already and at what volume they're searching for that. Really, really insightful, because again, this is changes that you can make to your search campaigns. Next, we're going to look at losses. So this is where you're getting traffic, but you're actually getting less traffic than your competitors. This means that these are keywords that are competitive, but you're losing out. These are insights that you can use to make changes to your organic search keywords, changing rankings, changing terms, changing phrasing within your stories. But it's also giving you insights on where maybe you can be bumping up your search bidding. Now, remember, our profile here is focusing on page search. So as we click over, we can see that there's actually very little overlap in non-branded keywords between WAPO, The Times, and CNN. This is an important nugget of information because while there's a lot of organic search competition, there doesn't seem to be as much here with paid. We're also seeing less keywords that Washington Post and its competitors are bidding on. And so knowing that paid search will likely need to step it up post cookies, there's an implication that there's a lot of opportunity here to really dive into and own this space. So that pretty much wraps up what I had prepared for us today. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got a few minutes for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up to the group here. If there's anything that you guys have for me, please feel free to go ahead and share that with the group. Yara, did you have anything also that had been submitted? We can also use the chat, so feel free to type in if you guys have any questions. I also see that there was a question about the video quality. I apologize for that. We'll go ahead and share the recording. That should hopefully be a little clearer as we're navigating. It looks like we've got one question that's come through about the support that we're providing to navigate. For folks that decide to sign up with us, we actually have an entire onboarding team. There's a handover between the sales process and the account manager. Within that, there's an entire discovery session of understanding specifically what are your goals with using the tool. From there, there's client success managers, as well as account managers that have a very laid out program to take you through. We make sure that the teams are well trained to navigate. And then also there's an ongoing account manager that's there to support you if there are questions that come up with navigation. So we have another question about what we think Similarweb's biggest advantages during this industry shift. I've alluded to this, but I think one of the biggest things is that our platform is already cookieless. After the end of this webinar, we're open to booking time with any one of our sales teams. And within that, we can take you through how we actually collect, collate, and clean data. Similarweb actually doesn't publish direct measurement. What it does do is it models out trends. And because of how we go about collecting that data, even when cookies go away, like I said, that data is still going to be consistent. I see that there are questions about pricing. That's all something that I think we can answer with our actual sales teams, because it does depend on what bundle, what packages you guys are looking for and what features. Included in that is that we have country filters, including emerging markets. Let me see. There's another question here on how Similarweb accesses third-party cookies currently. This is something that, again, the sales team is going to be able to go into in more detail. But like I said, Similarweb actually doesn't use third-party cookies at all in how we actually build out our insights and our data. It is something that I think is distinct and unique compared to some of our competitors.